We can now go over the best profile on Instagram.
Boom. All right,
Yeah,
cool. Yeah. And then if I want to remove it, do I just go like this? Oh yeah, look at
yeah.
that. Look at that. So easy. Boom.
Okay, yeah.
All right, cool. Just 1 second here. Boom. All right. So first thing I wanted to go first thing I wanted to get into is how you rose from the ashes of your previous Instagram account.
Yeah, being sent to the internet gulag wasn't a very fun experience. Well, basically, what ended up happening was I've spent I've spent a significant amount of time actually researching this subject, more than I would like to admit. And actually, what ended up happening, and turns out around December 5th or 6th, there was a massive change in the Instagram algorithm. And basically, I think it peaked around December 9th, where a lot of accounts got terminated. Now, the reason why I know this, I went through some pages, mainly Reddit, and it was kind of a lot of people were actually complaining about the same thing happening, and that was mainly being deleted for literally no reason, no copyright strikes, no violation, none of that, no explanations. And people were obviously very frustrated. And kind of one of the things that I found out was that the all of the deletions that happen on Instagram, and I would also say Facebook and a lot of other platforms, they're automated. So it's never like a person that deletes you. It's never someone who literally just doesn't like your content. It's literally just the AI at that moment determining that for some unknown reason you're a problem. And there were actually people who complained that they never posted anything. They had like no violations. They mainly posted photos of their cats and dogs, and they got taken down for the same reason. So obviously that was a hit. How serious it was, I have yet to figure out. I think in the long term they affected me. Short term, probably not, because a lot of the people, as you saw it, I'm practically back at 2,000 followers, and I was like at 4,000 before I got taken down. And I think what also ended up happening is because if anyone knows my content, and if anyone knows what kind of stuff I post, it's really nothing to be offended about, even if it sounds a little bit edgier, like in the
Yeah.
very beginning. It's like nothing is remotely problematic. I mainly just tell people how to get their lives better. And I'm not a person who talks about some ex problematic subject or use some ex problematic imagery. But at that moment, the Instagram algorithm decided that was problematic, and they took me down. And obviously, I got lots of support from people who didn't like that idea, because again, they appreciated my content, and they kind of realized, well, if they can take down this guy for literally just telling people to lose a little bit of weight and maybe help their lives in this capacity, what's to say they're not going to take me down? So I got a lot of support from that, from those types of people. Obviously, that's extremely appreciated. And now we're moving on until hopefully another platform rises up that doesn't delete users for whatever reason.
Yeah, that's a concern. Even I don't know if you noticed when you first before you actually got deleted, I wasn't able to search your name.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and that happens with other people. And
Hmm.
usually it seems a little random, but it
Hmm.
also, it's hard to not be conspiratorial, like if someone's not going along with a certain narrative
Hmm. Hmm.
or whatever. You notice that I've actually noticed that if I post something and it actually goes, if I get like 1,000 likes on something and it's like it doesn't even need to be edgy. It
Yeah,
just can be
absolutely.
slightly edgy or saying something that's a little spicy. And then all of a sudden I'll get like a massive dip. Like my stories will go way down. Or if I
Hmm.
if I tag someone in specifically like um that I know like is kind of already shadow banned, that'll like
Hmm.
affect my reach.
Actually, that's not a conspiracy theory. That's a real thing. If you read the Instagram terms and agreements and their kind of community guidelines, they specifically say that there are individuals whose content they will not promote, and if someone promotes the content of that individual or promotes that profile, they will actually affect that other profile as well. So it's really not a conspiracy theory. It's basically how it functions. So yeah, kind of the thing, when what happens when people cannot search up your profile, it generally happens. There's like one thing that fires it off. They have to delete your post for some violation, or a post or a story or a comment, because that basically tells Instagram, okay, you're kind of going in the timeout zone. and people won't be able to search for you. So what ended up happening with me on my on the previous profile was that I had a photo taken down. When was it? It was taken in 2019, if I'm not mistaken, something like that, or maybe 2020. So like 2 years ago. And the photo, I can even show it to you. I mean, not at this moment, but I can send it to you. It's literally me and two of my friends standing, literally just standing at a concert. And I wrote the caption something in the lines of, because we were watching this band from Poland, black metal, Magla. And it was kind of like I commented on the situation. It's kind of like I said, a lot of these guys who are like having like spikes and pentagrams and pretending to be evil, but meanwhile they're either all obese, overweight, or they're like skinny fat. It's like you aren't fooling anyone. So they deleted my content. They deleted that post.
What?
And
Do they consider that bullying or something?
well, that's the thing. Kind of to go over the same topic. If you go over the Instagram community guidelines, it's everything can be taken out of context. Everything can be conceived as bullying, hate speech, or whatever. I mean, I told you I had people who posted. There's like one chick who had like a profile on Instagram, and I read it. It was like hilarious. And someone there was like a user that's his name on Instagram was something monkey. So dude monkey, something like that. And the girl, that monkey character wrote a comment on her profile, and she just said thanks monkey, and they deleted her profile. So it's that absurd. But yeah, basically after they deleted my
It's like a race. It's like they thought that was racial or something.
no one knows because that's what I'm saying. It can literally be conceived as anything. So what ended up happening was that basically when they deleted that post, automatically people weren't able to search for me. My reach got literally nuked to oblivion, and then a couple of months later my account got taken down. Now this is the issue. I don't know what caused the account to get taken down. It might have been the fact that I was shadow banned and kind of in the gray zone of Instagram. It might be something completely different, because they didn't just delete my own personal profile. They deleted everything which was connected on the same Wi-Fi, and everything was connected on the same mobile number. So they deleted my personal Instagram, they deleted Legion Wear Instagram, they deleted my personal Facebook.
Oh my god,
everything. So yeah, they don't joke around,
dude. It's discouraging too, because I'll take an engagement loss if it's just because like the thing about it is I just want an even playing field. Like I like free speech, social media platform,
Yeah.
Like if I'm putting out shitty content and people aren't liking it, and that's why I'm not getting engagement, fuck yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because it's like, okay, well now I know. I just want to know that it's it's fair.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, another issue is that there aren't clear guidelines. I mean, if they said something in the lines of you cannot promote excessive weight loss in any capacity, I would say, okay, that's fine. I may not agree with it, but I'm like, okay, I know what I cannot post. If they say things like you cannot post, I don't know, these specific, I don't know,
pictures with guns even or something.
Yeah. That's another thing. Instagram doesn't necessarily say that you cannot post guns, but you cannot post guns every time, because every time that you post guns, this is also something else people don't know. Instagram has an image and a video verification algorithm or system. Basically, every time you post an image, there is a system in place that scans it, and it scans it for something. And now that can be guns, that can be this or that can be certain symbols. And as soon as they see it, you're automatically going down. They're probably going to delete that. So no one is, if they said something in the lines of you cannot post guns outside of a range, fine. No one is going to post guns outside of range, but let us know. But this way they use these vague estimates and vague guesses, and no one really knows what the rules are. So people get taken down for no reasons. And obviously this is a problem, especially for people like myself who use social media for a living. Basically, that's how I market my business. So yeah, it's a crazy business, but that's how it is.
Yeah, they're trying to economically crush certain individuals. And even Jack Donovan just posted something not too long ago saying his reach is getting obliterated, and he has a lot of followers. And he's noticing like more and more, like this is just coming from what he said. He said that he's noticing more and more that he's getting less and less engagement. And it's discouraging to someone if you're putting a bunch of effort into making good shit and all,
Yeah.
you go from getting like, 600 likes a post and all of a sudden you're getting like 40 likes a post. And you're like, what the fuck happened? Because I'll see people who have tons of followers, 20,000 followers. I mean, not crazy amount, but like enough. And they're getting less engagement than someone with 2,000.
Well, also specifically for the engagement issue, there was a problem. Something happened around January 26th. Again, ever since my account got taken down, I went super.
Went down the rabbit hole.
yeah, psyops, and like I investigated everything. And basically, what ended up happening was that on January 26th, again, something happened, and everyone's reach got terminated. The prevailing logic is that Instagram is trying to chase TikTok, because TikTok is the most downloaded app for a very long time. And obviously, what does TikTok post? Like short edit videos. So now they're really, really promoting Reels. Like, I don't know if you noticed it. I kind of know these numbers are artificial, but literally you can post a Reel that's actually just a photo, but you just post it in a video format, and it will have, if you have, let's say, 1,000 followers, you'll have like 3,000, 4,000 reach. In reality, that's not your real reach, because what they do is basically they push that video to everyone, and everyone who just opens it for 1 second, they viewed it as a view. So people are now encouraged to say like, oh, look at this, 10,000 people actually saw my reel, when in reality maybe 3,000 people actually watched it, and then the 7,000 just went like this. So they're actually trying to combat TikTok, and I think that's one of the big issues why everyone's reach is being taken down. You can just go on any platform and just type Instagram reach January 2021, 2022, or February 2022, and everyone is going to have the same issue. Reels are being promoted, images are being taken down, and kind of like what Mosseri said, the head honcho Instagram, he said that Instagram is no longer just a image sharing platform. So we just have to adapt, and hopefully something better is going to come up in the future.
Yeah, because I don't want to be too discouraged from, I want to share my thoughts online. I want to do the podcast. I want to, be able to promote that. But how do we overcome? How do we protect ourselves from getting wiped? Like I'm at the point now where I'm just trying not to care too much. Like if I woke up tomorrow, my Instagram was gone, I'd be like, oh, shit, right? Like I'm not worried about it for like financial reasons, because to be honest, like I haven't really built like my money doesn't come from Instagram, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not too worried about it. But for someone that's a coach or someone that literally gets clients from Instagram, do you ever think about going over to YouTube or something like that? Because YouTube seems a bit safer.
Yeah, it is.
And it seems like, we're talking about these bite-sized pieces of information. I would argue that, these conversations around training and nutrition, sure, you can put that in a reel, but there's a lot of like, I watch hour-long Renaissance periodization YouTube videos, and you're actually going to, you're going to learn something from that, or podcast format. But when you're just watching a reel, and a lot of these social media workout reels are pretty bad. Like there's a lot of bad information out there. So I'm kind of worried about everything becoming so bite-sized that you're not really getting much sustenance out of it.
Yeah, that actually is a legitimate issue, because I don't know if you kind of actually went over the logic of reels and kind of why they're so short. And it's the sad reality is that people's attention span has decreased significantly, and there is some people who argue and say that you have 3 seconds to grab someone's attention before they do this. So that is why reels are starting to come in, and why they're such a basically a garbage form of media, because in reality, what can you say in 60 seconds? And in reality, it's not even 60 seconds, because you're looking at if you can publish this video and last for like 15 or 20 seconds, because the shorter it is, the more people are going to watch it, and then it's going to get pushed more by the algorithm. Now, regarding the second topic, and that is moving to other platforms, potentially, yes. I was actually significantly considering on a drive back from the place I was a couple of weeks ago. It was like a 2-hour drive. And one of the things that I was legitimately considering in that time was the idea of potentially starting a podcast, because I can't do videos. I mean, I can, but that just requires, I'm somewhat of a perfectionist. So if I get into some into a topic.
Mhm.
Like for instance, I recently got, not recently, but last maybe 8 or 9 months, I really got into Photoshop. So I'm all the day I'm like
Yeah.
watching Photoshop videos
Yeah.
and kind of how to do certain things and how to perform certain edits, and kind of like a video was even like a couple of branches above that. So it was literally eat up my entire time, and it's and the problem is that video formatting requires a lot of really good equipment, which isn't cheap, and it takes a lot of time. And kind of I was potentially contemplating the idea of podcasts. Number one, because of what you just previously mentioned, bit size format. I'm not a fan of that. I
Mhm.
kind of, one of the things that I dislike is the fact that I have to limit myself in how much I can write on Instagram.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, if I just have a spoken platform like a
So
podcast, I
much
can
easier.
actually, yeah, and it's more organic, because certain things when you talk about them, they naturally just come to you. So I was contemplating the idea of potentially starting a podcast. I might do that in the future, where I can actually go in detail about certain topics. Maybe, especially like because I have a lot of interests. Obviously, the main one is training and physical
Mhm.
betterment, but I like philosophy. I like
Yeah.
to talk about basically human nature. I like literature, as you can see. So a lot of things I'm into, and I can kind of go in detail about those topics, and maybe potentially. And also something that's a little bit more encouraging is that Spotify seems to be not so trigger happy when it comes to
Yeah.
censorship. So
Yeah.
maybe.
100%. I don't feel as worried about posting like a podcast where we just talk about whatever.
Mhm.
It seems a
Yeah,
little safer. And I'm just gonna keep doing my thing. You know, if
yeah,
they
definitely.
come after me, I'll be like, well, that's pretty stupid because I haven't really said anything that intense. And yeah,
Well,
no, I could totally sorry to cut you off there, but you could definitely get, a cheaper camera. I bought a we can talk about this after too, about just some
mhm,
like this camera I'm using right now. It's during a stream, so it doesn't look as good, but if you,
mhm,
it's a Canon EOS, and I
mhm,
bought it for like $600 Canadian. And
mhm,
you could do something where, you can do a podcast setting, but just
mhm,
film yourself talking, so you can kind of release a podcast version that's just audio and then maybe some video.
mhm,
Um,
mhm,
Someone that I just had on the podcast, who I'm going to have on again, is Jeffrey Verity Schofield.
mhm,
He's I can show you his YouTube after, but he makes
mhm,
really good videos, and they're super simple and they're raw. He doesn't even use that great of a camera. He just uses
mhm.
his phone, but he has like, I don't know, I think he's got like over 40K subs. His last video got over 60K views. Like, he's doing really well, and he adds the funny content in there, but he knows his shit, and it's really simple. You can make stuff that's simple. You don't need to make some crazy, highly edited, Jeff Nippert
Yeah, yeah,
style
yeah,
video.
yeah,
Even though his videos are awesome, but you don't
There's an
you don't
entire camera crew behind him and like a complete editing studio.
yeah, and if I saw a guy like you just making YouTube videos that were just, you talking to a camera and maybe a few B-roll edits, like that'd be
Yeah,
great.
yeah,
Even
yeah,
just
yeah.
like even 10 minutes. I consider a 10-minute video bite-sized.
Because it is. Because
It
in
is.
reality, what
Yeah.
can you do in 10 minutes? Yeah, I mean, it's something that I'm gonna definitely consider in the future. Currently, now that's an impossible thing to do because there's just too many things going on. It's like everyone wants to pretend that they're busy all the time. But one of the for the people who do not know, we've been kind of planning out this conversation for like a week and a half, and the reason for that is just because my schedule is completely chaotic. I'm almost like every minute of my day is like taken up by something, so I always have to
Mhm.
try to free up space by taking out time from another project, and kind of like podcasting and video format is something that would again take up a lot of time, and I'll probably have to cut something in order to do that. And I don't know, maybe in the future, maybe even before the end of summer, I might start that podcast. And as you said, kind of start off fairly simple,
Yeah.
and see how it progresses. Because again, I wanna one of the main things that I always wanted to do was provide information that's free.
Yeah.
When I when I
100%.
when I started off training myself, actually going to the gym, it's kind of like information was very limited because obviously YouTube fitness wasn't what it is today. And also there was always like um, everyone was either giving half truths or straight up lying or having things being taken down, being covered by a paywall. And one of the things that I always wanted to do was provide that information for free, because I know how valuable information can be when you don't have it. And one of the things, and obviously that's kind of one of the reasons why I started my Instagram, and that's obviously to promote my coaching service. But with a podcast platform, I can potentially expand my reasoning for something. For instance, if I'm a really big believer in macro dieting, and also been a big believer in actually spacing out your meals evenly throughout the day, and I'm a big believer in high intensity training. And I'm kind of one of the guys who, if I'm going to do something and I believe in something, I want to know why it works. So for instance, I'm not just going to tell people, hey, listen, you want to train high intensity, and when someone says, well, why? They say, well, that's because it's the best thing to do. But yeah, but why? And I'm kind of the guy who asks that question: why is high intensity the best? And then you can, and in the podcast format, I can actually explain, well, it's because the actin and the myosin make these cross bridges when the mechanical tension is the greatest, etc., etc. And that's not something that you can really do on Instagram, because
Well, you can't explain that in a 15-second reel. Come on, man.
Yeah, you obviously don't know that really well. Yeah, exactly.
That's funny. Yeah, man. No, I think that'd be really cool. I'm gonna, after this podcast, I want to send you some YouTubers that I've been following that kind of make simple content. Just maybe some inspiration for you.
Yeah, sure.
So over the last few months, I've definitely had a lot of like changes, I guess perspective shifts when it comes to training. So I wanted to talk to you about some things today. So obviously that's why I got you on here. The first thing I wanted to get into is the relationship between strength, size, and performance. So you have people that are very they're hypertrophy focused, and they'll say things like, you always want to work in the 8 to 12 rep range, or, you don't want to do too low reps. There's this difference between strength training and hypertrophy training, but you've said it before. And I'm curious, how do hypertrophy training and strength training feed into each other?
Well, one of the things we have to understand is that, generally speaking, and I hate to bring this up because it's always like a scapegoat, and people are often using it as a cheap method of explaining their practice. But basically, there is a huge difference when performance enhancing drugs are introduced. Now, I haven't used PEDs, and therefore, for me, and for all of my other clients, I have realized that really only one method works. Basically, in order for a muscle to grow, it has to get stronger, and vice versa. In order for you to get stronger, you have to make the muscle grow. Now, in that later department, basically, if you want the muscle to grow, you have to get stronger. That is something that can slightly change, because you can definitely get stronger through simple technique manipulation. You can get stronger through CNS adaptation and a couple of other smaller tricks. But in general, you need to get stronger to get bigger. Simply put, there is only one. Like, people will often argue that either volume is the main driver of growth, intensity is the main driver of growth, and that's something that we can debate on and on. Because, and I know someone can now point out and say, well, this study said if you do 45 different sets, and this study will say if you did one set, that's enough. In reality, regarding volume and intensity, both things have been clinically proven as effective, which basically tells us, well, both volume and intensity can actually make a muscle grow. But inevitably, what is undebatable is that progressive overload is something that will actually make the muscle bigger. Now, how do we progressively overload? Well, we can do so by either increasing the amount of weight that we lift. We can also increase the amount of sets. We can increase the amount of reps, or we can do all three things together. Now, in whatever way you decide to progressively overload, I think in that capacity, it isn't that important. But here is something that a lot of people don't understand. You can inevitably just push one vector of adaptation, meaning you cannot just push reps. You cannot just push set. You cannot just push weight, because oftentimes, in order to do more sets, you have to be able to do more reps with the same amount of sets. And oftentimes, in order to do more reps, you have to be able to do more weight. So you have to, because all those things basically work in tangents, you have to get stronger on all of these factors in order for the entirety in the entire picture to basically elevate. And kind of to go and explain on another subject, the reason why you need you need to get you basically need to get stronger for a bigger muscle, simply because you, at least in the way I generally train, that is a high intensity. Mechanical tension is the main thing that really I believe that builds the most amount of muscle, and you have to physically push your body in order for you to do that. Mechanical tension doesn't, at least adequate mechanical tension, doesn't happen involuntarily. Meaning, if you want to reach, and by mechanical tension, I just mean how close you are to failure. So if you're doing a set of bench press and you're comfortable in 5 reps, well, you aren't reaching a sufficient amount of mechanical tension. But if your max is at 10, 8 or 9 are going to be difficult. 10th is going to be the 10th rep is going to be really difficult, and you have to push yourself. That's not something that can happen involuntarily. You have to want to do that, and in order for you to do that, and as we said, to progressively overload, you have to get stronger. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to. I'm kind of the believer that reps aren't that important, as long as you generally get stronger. Meaning, if you train exclusively in the 12 to 15 rep range and you get stronger in the 12 to 15 rep range, it doesn't really matter. If you go from like a, I don't know, a 225 bent over row for 3 sets of 15, and then you progress to 235 for 2 sets of 15, you progressed. It doesn't matter the fact that you did 15 reps or maybe 4.
Yeah.
The only difference, obviously, is there is a certain amount of specificity that happens when you are training in certain rep ranges. Meaning, if you, since you mentioned Renaissance periodization, if you know they're kind of really, they and obviously juggernaut training systems work in tangent a lot of times. So that's Chadwick Wesley Smith, and he is a really accomplished powerlifter and obviously someone who's really knowledgeable in that field. Well, the juggernaut training system, or the juggernaut AI that now a lot of people are doing, is nothing more than a really well built American powerlifting system. And if you go from an American powerlifting system, it's structured in blocks. So you have a 10-week block, an 8-week block, a 5-week block, 3-week block, and a singles block. Now, why is that? Well, the reasoning is simple. If you do tens a lot, 10 rep sets, you will obviously get better at doing 10 rep sets, because you're doing them a lot. That is that specificity that we talk about. So for instance, although let's give an example. If let's say you're doing 225 or 10 on the squat, that if we use those basic internet calculators and calculate that in, that would put that your 1 rep max is maybe around, let's say, low estimate 225, 260, maybe 280. But in reality, what tends to happen if you're always doing sets of 10 and now you try a 1 rep max, what ends up happening is your central nervous system isn't primed for that. Your body, literally your connective tissue isn't even primed for that, because it isn't built to withstand such sufficient loads, and you might fall maybe 20 pounds short. And because that's why you have to, for strength at least, you have to train somewhat in those strength specific numbers, because that is a large component, as I mentioned, of strength is central nervous system adaptation. So, and you need to, and the only way to develop your central nervous system is obviously through lifting in the appropriate amount of reps, singles, doubles, triples, etc. That obviously isn't to say if you get stronger on tens, it will have any impact on your singles. But maybe if you get stronger in your tens, but then also your fives, and then also your triples, now that's going to have a much more significant pull on your 1 rep max power.
Mm-hmm. And then if you train in those lower rep ranges, that's going to affect your higher rep ranges, I would assume, as well.
Absolutely.
So
now,
it's like,
yeah, it feeds on one another. It's kind
yeah.
of like what we mentioned. In order for you to get stronger in your 1 rep max, you have to do also lower numbers, and kind of vice versa. If you get stronger on your lower numbers, you're going to get in your higher. But here is the difference. Just as we said those things about the lower numbers and kind of how you need that CNS adaptation, also what tends to happen if you're doing only low numbers and now you want to do high numbers, so you go from doubles to 10 or 15 rep sets, you have less muscular endurance. That's also something that tends to happen for if this is like a typical power lifter scenario. Let's say, hypothetical example, let's say someone deadlifts 405 for a single. That's his max. If we use the same calculator analogy, that would say that he could probably do 315 for 10. But if you give a power lifter whose 1 rep max is 405 and he never did 10 rep sets, and you tell him now, okay, I want you to do 315 for 10. After the 7th rep, his lower back is going to be like this. He's going to be cramped up. He's going to be having so much glycogen buildup. He's going to be so filled with water and blood, and he's so not going to be used to that stimulus that he's simply going to bail at the 7th or 8th rep. And that's what I'm saying. Certain specificity applies, but generally speaking, strength pulls strength.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, that's really cool. You brought up the very first thing you brought up is performance enhancing drugs, and I actually had that I wanted to get into that a little bit towards the end, but I want to talk about it now since you brought it up. Some of these guys that are enhanced, I'm not going to name any names, but you'll go on their YouTube. Well, everyone. No, I mean, like, just, I'm not going to name, like, I don't give a shit. Like, I don't put any moral judgment on whether you're enhanced or not. I think that's stupid. Like, some of my favorite educators and influencers are enhanced, and they give out great information.
Absolutely.
But there is a question that, as a natural lifter, do you need to consider yourself as a natural lifter and train in that way? Because natural lifters have a unique set of challenges. We might not be able to, like I was saying, there's this guy on YouTube who just grabs the pink dumbbells and does like pump work, right?
Yeah, and he grows.
He might grow from that, if you're enhanced. But like as a natural lifter, like I'm fighting for every scrap of muscle. I need to progressively overload, and I need to train and in a way that allows me to do that rather than just pump work.
Exactly. It's kind of like, well, one of the individuals that I really liked and that heavily inspired me when I started lifting weights was Jim Wendler. I mentioned him previously. And there's like a fantastic video of Jim Wendler. It's like he was on the Elite FTS table talk, and someone said like there's something in the lines of like natural training programs, and he looked at his friend Dave Tate, who runs Elite FTS, and he says, "Hey Dave, have you ever seen a natural training program?" It's like there isn't such a thing as a natural and an enhanced training program, because the logic is simple. What works for a natural might work for an enhanced individual. Now, I would say that's somewhat true, because as you mentioned, you can push certain envelopes. I obviously cannot say this because I was never enhanced, but I know a lot of people who are personal friends of mine, and I know the progress that they made, and you can actually push certain vectors in a certain field and get progress. For instance, if you're a natural guy, as you mentioned, you have to progressively overload. There's just no way. You cannot just do endless amounts of volume with a pink dumbbell and expect to grow. Whereas when you're enhanced, muscle protein synthesis isn't limited to 72 hours. It's much longer. Second of all, the threshold to what builds muscle is much lower. And and people always hate this because when you're enhanced, and this is like, because this is like bringing your final card, because when you throw this, kind of they believe everything goes out of the window, and there's this famous study where they put people on 150 milligrams of testosterone, 250 milligrams of testosterone, 500 and 700, and they strictly told them do not train. The people that were on 700 milligrams of testosterone built 15 pounds of muscle. So what are we talking about? Now, you can obviously say, well, how did they know? They built 15 pounds of muscle, etc. The dude built something. We're obviously not going to argue.
He wasn't training. They weren't training at
all.
No,
not at all. No. So it's like only one variable changed, and that was the testosterone intake, and the dude's built muscle. Now we can say, well, maybe not 15 pounds were muscle. Maybe let's say 5 was muscle, and maybe the rest was glycogen. Mm-hmm. Fine, but as a natural, you cannot just magically put on 10 pounds of glycogen like this. It doesn't happen like that. Especially if you're like me and you're like I'm 79 kilos, so that's 175. Like I'm not gonna put 10 pounds of glycogen just like that.
No.
So they make a huge difference. They make a huge difference, and that's something that you generally have to take in consideration, obviously, because obviously when you're on drugs, certain things are a little bit easier, and you kind of have a little bit of wiggle room. But then again, when you're on drugs, that also allows you to train harder and recover easier. So It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, and it's not like there's a lot of people that have the mistaken belief that you're just gonna take drugs and immediately blow up. It's like, no, the greats still worked really hard, and it's not.
Well, if you actually go in a regular gym, and let's say no one wanted to lie, and everyone will say if they're natural or not. The people who generally, some of the worst people that you'll ever find, it for worst in the sense of physical development in the gym, are going to be on a lot of steroids. I know from personal example, I know a lot of people when I used to train in the public gyms in the days of yore. Some of the people who were the weakest, who were the most underdeveloped, or who were the most horrifically developed, meaning just shoulders, all hunched forward,
Yeah,
no legs,
just
skinny neck.
all front delts and chest.
Yeah, they were all on steroids. So it's like, I'm not that big. I'm not claiming to be that my physique is somehow reminiscent of peak male aesthetics, but I mean the guys had serum level testosterone that was 10 times over mine, and they looked like garbage. So that tells you that just because your T might be high, that doesn't mean that your muscle mass or strength might be high. So you can't just, it's not the magical pill that just makes you jacked and juicy.
Hey, I can hear you, but it looks like my camera froze.
Yeah, it looks like it did.
1 sec. Maybe if I turn it off and on, it'll work. I'll edit this out.
Sure. I was worried that it wasn't mine.
I mean, I can hear you fine.
I can hear you. Yeah, it's fine now.
That was weird. Yeah, man. I hate when that happens because it ruins my train of thought. What was I going to get into? Yeah, so like the natural versus enhanced thing is interesting. It's something to consider, but yeah, some people get offended when you say stuff like that. It's like, oh, you think like just because I'm on drugs, I don't need to work hard. It's like, no, I'm not saying that at all. Like, I'm just saying that.
The problem is that some people actually believe in that. So I can understand perfectly from the person who takes performance enhancing drugs, because now if they say that they take it, the average layman is going to now think that they literally sit on their ass and they just build muscle, when in reality that's not the case.
No, and it's a nuanced conversation for sure. Yeah, so we kind of got into that. If you're a natural guy, you need to progressively overload, and we talked about the different aspects of progressively overloading. I made a post on that. It's not all just, it's like weights, reps. Those are the basics. But then there's certain other things like, exercise variation and things like that.
Recent ranges of motion, maybe time under tension, million factors.
So in regards to strength training and bodybuilding and the symbiosis or the balance between those two, what would like a program look like? Like, how would you program strength and bodybuilding into the same routine, or what would a session look like potentially?
Well, that's exactly how I program. There is no other possibility, because when I have clients or when I program it for myself, I if someone told me, well, I wanted to be strong but not build muscle, I would say like, well, I'm not the person for you, because I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to separate just build muscle and not get strong, or just get strong and not build muscle. So basically, my reasoning is simple. The start of your workout and the core of it should be revolving around the compound lifts and potentially, depending on which block you are in, working in a specific rep range. Generally speaking, if someone, because this requires a little bit more dedication, if someone really wants to hone in on the strength gains, I would put him like on something like a classic American style block periodization. 10-week cycles, 8-week cycles, 5-week cycles, triples, etc. But if not that, I use a very simple step periodization. So let's say 3 weeks you're going to be doing it. You're going to be doing your compounds in a 5-rep range. 3 weeks you're going to be doing them on a 3-week range. 3 weeks you're going to be doing them on a 1-rep range. And basically, after you do that, so basically you have your compounds which function as the main strength builders around your workouts. After that, we would program in assistance exercises that are complementary of the muscle that you train in that session, and also something that will potentially elevate your strength in on the compound that you train that day. So for instance, if we have, let's say, a day where you train bench, what are obviously going to be the main muscle groups involved in the bench? Well, they're going to be the pecs, the triceps, and the shoulders. So now, if we're going to do our main compound work in the 5s, 3s, and singles, we want to do assistance work that's going to target either the chest, the tricep, or the shoulders, or maybe all three. And then we want to program in, along with that, exercises that are going to directly benefit the bench press. So now we have a couple of pools. We can now obviously look into the exercises which can be just looked at the bodybuilding movements, but also we can also use certain exercises as the ones that can be also assistance movements for the bench, but it can be also like a bodybuilding movement. So for instance, if we're going to use the bench press, one of the exercises that I really like and I program in a lot is the close grip bench. Now, why is the close grip bench so effective? Well, because what did we say previously, overloading on different capacities. The close grip bench, one of the things it does, it increases the range of motion. So it's a fantastic way to strengthen your bench alone. Now, secondly, it involves a lot of tricep work. So that means obviously you're going to build a lot of tricep strength. So we want to look for exercises that can work in tangent, both as assistance exercises for the compound that you're training, but both as exercises that can be just for bodybuilding sakes. Now, if you want to step things up a notch, you can divide your workouts, and maybe because I'm a big fan of doing every muscle group twice a week. Maybe the first time you train a specific muscle group, maybe it'll be mostly focused on the assistance work. So something that will directly work on bringing up your compound. And maybe the second session of the week will be more bodybuilding related workouts. So maybe it will be something that won't directly increase the bench, but will indirectly by building the chest, the triceps, and similar muscle groups. So that's personally how I would do it. So basically start off with a compound, make that your priority movement of that day, and then you want to transition into assistance or isolation exercises that are either going to directly make you stronger on the compound or will indirectly make you stronger on the compound by making you build muscle. And that's basically how I do it.
Okay, 1 sec here. I'm just getting my my camera died. I just got to plug it. Just give me 1 second here. Having technical difficulties.
Okay, let people can just view my forearm development in the meantime. Yeah. I saw that something was wrong, but I didn't want to.
Oh, you're going on a good rant. I didn't want to stop you.
Okay, we can do this again.
See, this is why you don't do these things live, man.
Yeah, imagine this happened live.
See, this is why you can't. This is the stress of being a YouTuber right here.
I can live without that stress.
Here's the deal. The show must go on. I'm switching to webcam. Look at me. I look like shit on webcam. All right. The show must go on. I'll figure out the cameras.
We'll survive.
Sounds good, buddy. Okay, so you're talking about, you program for strength and hypertrophy. That's just how you do things. And now the one thing I wanted to get into is, that's something that I've kind of changed my mind on, because I've heard a lot of, like Paul Carter and some of these. Do you know N1? No. N1 training, like Coach Kassem. The one, the topic here, what I have written down here is Barbell Supremacist versus Biomechanics Enjoyer.
Okay. I think I know. Well, that's the guy with the long hair.
No, I'm not sure. This is just something that I came up with, was like the fact that there's some people that are like married to the barbell, and like if you don't use a barbell, it's not real training or whatever. And then there's the people that are like, well, some tools, some implements are better for training a muscle. And I guess you could say, this is a bit of a debate, because at first I was like, yeah, like when you think about it, barbells they're just kind of an arbitrary tool, I guess. Like we just develop barbells and we develop plates, and it's not necessarily the best way to train, but they're very convenient. And my whole thing is, some people will argue like a barbell bench press versus a dumbbell bench press. They'll argue that the dumbbell variation is better because you have freedom of movement and you can, adduct the humerus and better contract the pecs or whatever. They'll make their biomechanics argument. what are your thoughts on that? Like, what's the balance between like being a barbell minimalist or a barbell supremacist versus,
Well, my take on it, that you shouldn't view training from an ideological lens.
yeah.
I'm of the belief that I don't care. I would gladly take out barbells and dumbbells tomorrow for my training regimen if I found out other methods that work better. So you shouldn't be, as you mentioned, you shouldn't be married to one training system or maybe one training method, because inevitably it leads to gaps in information processing. So regarding dumbbells and barbells and kind of like machines in general, as you mentioned, they're tools. And
Mhm.
certain tools work better in certain situations. For instance, if you need to, I don't know, um, if you need to fix up maybe your, I don't know, your plumbing, you aren't going to use like a sledgehammer. Like you probably won't try to do that. You're going to use a sledgehammer when you need to do something rather different. So if your goal, as I mentioned previously, I don't know if this is going to come, if that's going to come in the video, but basically when I program in training methods for my clients, basically, uh, oh, you're cut off again.
Don't worry, just keep going.
Okay, so when I program in training methods for my clients, obviously my goal is to get them as strong as possible, and also to put on as most muscle as we can. Now, the way we do that, as I explained, is strength primarily comes from the compound exercises: squat, bench, deadlift, and overhead press. At least that's how I do it. So once we have the main work on the compounds completed, either in the fives, triples, or single rep ranges, or if we're doing a standard US block periodization, that might be tens, eights, fives, etc. So once we finish up with the compound work, we're going to transition into assistance or isolation exercises, and now we can view them from two different angles. The first one can be exercises that are strictly going to, or that are more in favor of assistance work that's going to benefit the compounds. So meaning something that won't probably build that much muscle, but it will just make you better at the compound through time. And then you have other exercises which are going to indirectly build muscle, but that are indirectly going to make you stronger by building muscle. And we want to find exercises that kind of fall in the gaps between. So which are going to be the exercises that are going to get you both strong conventionally on the conventional exercise, and which one are going to be the ones that are going to get you strong by building muscle. And maybe you can have one day where it's going to be more dedicated to the exercises that are going to directly make you stronger on the compounds, and another day they're going to indirectly make you stronger on the compounds by making you build more muscle. Now, barbells, dumbbells, machines, they're all tools that can be used on this spectrum. Meaning, if let's say on the first day, and I gave the bench analogy, when we finish our heavy bench, now we want to look at exercises which are going to help our bench. We can do so directly by making us stronger on the bench, or indirectly by building muscle. So maybe on the first training day, when I'm training the bench for the first time, I might stick to more exercises that are going to directly strengthen the bench. So I might do, for instance, I don't know, let's say dumbbell, and maybe we're gonna do the close grip bench. Maybe we're gonna do the Larson press when your feet are up and you're just using your pecs, etc. Maybe we're gonna do that. But maybe on the second time when we're training the bench or chest that week, we might completely switch to machines and maybe fixed exercise, because they are maybe more beneficial for putting on muscle in that way. And secondly, uh, the chances of injury are much lower when you're switching up exercises here and there,
Mm.
and also not just doing them in a singular plane of motion. That's, for instance, some of the, and this isn't some base bodybuilding knowledge. It's something that's even done in powerlifting. If you look at Louis Simmons on his repetition method, or maybe even the compounds, they always change them up, because they realized if you just do the same exercise with the same setup all the time, eventually you're either going to burn out, or you're going to get injured, or you're going to do both. So I would say everything has a place and a time. So I would say if your goal is to get stronger and bigger, predominantly in the same time, without sacrificing one than other, I would use both the dumbbells, barbells, and machines.
Mm.
Probably barbells and dumbbells more, because they're going to lean on the strength side. But again, if you're a guy who's in his 40s and you aren't that interested in maybe pushing the numbers all that much, it's perfectly fine, and there is no shame in doing more machines and maybe cables. There really isn't. So I don't believe, again, don't view nutrition, don't view training from an ideological lens, because it's flawed.
Yeah.
Because it's going to obscure your viewpoint on other ways that you can get conventionally strong or build muscle, just because you refuse to view it from another perspective. So I think that's a huge mistake that people are making.
100%. Yeah. Don't be dogmatic about it. You know,
Yeah.
and like I almost got to the point where I thought, well, you know, like anything is better than barbells for hypertrophy because, you know, stimulus to fatigue ratio. Like I kind of got in that headspace a little bit, but I'm like, dude, how am I when it comes to loading potential as well? Like we're talking about you needing to progressively overload to build muscle. It's like
it's easier on barbell.
Yeah, it's really hard on dumbbells. Like I'm maxing out on bench dumbbell bench because like just getting like, dude, getting 100-pound dumbbells up onto a bench, it's hard. It's really hard, and it's an unstable load too. That makes it more difficult.
Exactly.
You know,
Not
right
only
now,
difficult, but also more dangerous.
more dangerous as well. And you know, there are ways around that. You know, you can do like dumbbell floor press where you put the bench up here and then grab the dumbbells. It makes it a little bit easier. But then you're limiting your range of motion, and there's other
Again, not perfect.
Not perfect. So there's just different tools to achieve. You know, there's not one way to skin a cat, but
Exactly.
you know, the barbells are very important. You were talking about recovery and switching up exercises. What do you think of this approach? So right now, I'll just to put this into context, is I used to have pretty bad low back issues, which I don't anymore, and now I'm doing, you know, stiff-legged deadlifts, and I'm feeling great. My back's feeling good. But what I've been doing is I noticed that if I do too many axial loading movements in one session, sometimes my back will feel a little bit tired and inflamed. So what I'm doing now is I'm doing a training block where my very first movement, let's take my lower body day. So I'm doing stiff-legged deadlifts, which is like I'm loading my spine. I'm like, it's a good compound movement. And then instead of doing back squats, then I'm doing like leg press or hack squats. So I'm kind of limiting the amount of axial loading I'm doing, or spinal loading. Do you think that's like a good approach for some people that have issues with?
Definitely, yes. You want to, there is a certain amount of pressure or fatigue that any joint, soft or connective tissue, that it can't take without it basically succumbing to some damage. Meaning, if you are going to use a lot of movements which put a lot of torque and a lot of pressure on the lower back, you're eventually going to reach a point where you're just going to injure yourself, because there is a certain amount of pressure that any joint and muscle group can take. But over that pressure, it doesn't matter how good your form is, you're just going to reach a point of pressure where it is too much. And that is why it's often easier to injure yourself when you're really, really strong versus when you're in a very much a beginner in training. Because when you're just a beginner in training, maybe the most that you can back squat is like 60 kilos or 135. So even if your form is horrendous, on one day or maybe an entire week or maybe even an entire month, if you're lucky and you're doing it wrong, you probably won't injure yourself, because your lower body has a general ability to withstand that amount of pressure, even though it's relatively extremely hard for you. If 60 kilos is your one rep max, it'll be 100% of your strength. So, but meanwhile, someone who's maybe squatting, I don't know, 300 kilos or 660 pounds, he can get injured on 70%, because that's going to be still like something in the lines of 200 and something kilos. So, or 400 and something pounds. So that's simply going to put more wear and tear on the body. So you want to figure out what amount of volume and what amount of pressure your body can take. Personally, for me, and the way that I do this myself, is that I try to deadlift, conventional deadlift, and Romanian deadlift on the same workout. Impossible. I would feel not just my CNS being fried, but I would feel my lower back literally feeling it like it's about to burst. It was not even pain in the sense of like, oh, something is wrong. No. I'm saying in the sense of
just tired.
Yeah, it was incredibly tired, and it was incredibly stiff, to the point where it felt like someone went up a rock up my lower back, and I literally couldn't get it to relax. So I figured out I cannot do that on the same workout. Similarly, if I cannot also do Romanian deadlifts and rack pulls on the same workout. I can do one or the other, but I cannot do both. So you want to basically figure out what exercises cause what amount of tension and what amount of pressure, and you want to adjust accordingly. That's why, for instance, I always recommend to my clients that if they're going to be squatting on one day, it's a better idea to have the next day when they're going to be doing deadlifts. It's a better idea to have a day in between where you're going to rest instead of going one day squat, one day deadlift. Even though the squat and the way I coach it is mainly quad dominant and knee dominant. It isn't so much hip and lower back dominant. There's still going to be some pressure on the lower back that might be enough to spill over in pressure when you're doing your deadlift. So definitely you want to space out certain exercises, and definitely you don't want to do excessive loading on a certain joint or muscle group, because no matter how good your form is, there is a certain amount of pressure that your body can take without being injured. And if something happens after that, it doesn't. You will get injured, basically.
You know, and the benefits of the compound or the barbell compound movements are sometimes their detriment, because they do work the connective tissue and they help with that. You know, it's good. There's a lot of fear mongering around these movements. You know, they're not the cause of pain. I mean, they can cause pain if you're, you know, not taking your recovery into account, but they actually like help. You know, like the difference between a back squat and a leg press or a hack squat is you're not working everything. You're not working your entire body. You're not going to really be strengthening your joints and spine in the same way.
Well, someone would say, well, you can maybe split up the squat and maybe do if, let's say, the part of the squat which does the quads, and then the part of the squat which does the glutes, you can separate that in two different exercises. Yeah, you can, but that requires a certain amount of training expertise that a lot of people don't have, or don't have the time to invest to learn. If you're like a school teacher, you don't want to spend I don't know, 4 hours every day researching training methods and figuring out what works. That simply isn't effective. You just want to do what is the most effective at that time for the shortest period of time. That doesn't require hours and hours of knowledge for you to basically understand it. So you want to do so, and the squats are just a much better exercise, because even if you devoted enough time to learn how to squat, it's probably going to be a much faster than if you try to learn new training methods which require 10 other different exercises. So yeah, I believe they can be, for some people they can obviously get injured, but again, they can also show your weak points. If you're getting injured on squats all the time and supposedly your form is good, is your form good? Or if your form really is good, maybe you have a weakness that you should address, because squats they're just going to be like a weak link. The first thing that isn't very strong is just going to break. So that's something you probably need to work on.
That's exactly what happened to me. It seemed like my low back was always the weak link in the chain, and that's what would be sore the next day. And it wouldn't get sore to the point where, oh fuck, like I herniated a disc or something, but just like you said, like that tightness and that like feels really uncomfortable and just shitty. So what I did is I kind of backed away from those movements and then just focused on strengthening my low back, trying to get it to catch up. I was doing, 45-degree back extensions, even some flexion extension exercises, trying to just bring up my low back. And now that when I hit stiff leg deadlifts or squats, I don't have those same issues.
I always bring up the same analogy. I'm going to paraphrase it, obviously, but something in the lines of Louis Simmons once said it. The reason why people get injured is because they view exercise selection from a singular fashion, meaning they view the squat as just a leg exercise, or they view the deadlift as just a hamstring exercise. And in reality, it's a compound. It involves multiple different joints and connective tissue. And he said, like, you can have a squat, you can squat 500 pounds, and maybe you can have quads and knees that can support a 500-pound squat, but maybe your lower back can only support 350. And you try to squat 500 and you're like 150 pounds overloading more than what you should be on the lower back. So you probably need to bring your lower back, get your lower back stronger. So that's how you want to approach it. One of the ways, I'm not going to jinx it, but one of the ways I haven't been injured in a really, really long time. I mean, everyone's going to say that they train hard, but I generally train hard. I really do. And I haven't been injured in very long time, is because I devote a significant amount of attention in training those muscle groups which aren't the flashiest, but they are important for performance. Lower back, glutes, neck, I mean triceps. These exercises, which are maybe triceps are flashy, but that aren't as flashy as biceps and chest, because I know that those exercises are going to keep me injury free. Lower back, not lower back, but rear delts, for instance, as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Here I go. I'm gonna try getting this camera going one more time, and if it doesn't go, I'm gonna officially give up on it. Just give me 1 second.
Okay. Okay, now people can watch my
Yeah.
forearms one more time.
You got an impressive forearm, man. Forearms.
Thank you. Yeah, I really like them. The first time when I developed this like brachioradialis muscle, like this one here, this ball that pops up, I thought it's like fucking tumor. I was like, Jesus, what is this? Looks like the camera for $600 Canadian wasn't that price efficient.
Yeah, dude. Fucking who knows what I have to say. Know what it probably is? I know. Yeah, don't listen to my video expertise. The people are going to have to deal with less than ideal video quality.
Yeah, most people just watch those videos anyway. So
yeah,
not watch but listen.
Dude, we have high standards here. Okay. All right. Cool, man. Well, we've gotten into a lot of cool shit so far. The other thing I wanted to get into, the two last things we got here. You got time still?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, the cardio thing, because you saw that post I made not too long ago about cardio,
Mm-hmm.
and some people will say that cardio isn't demonized and people overdo cardio, but I know for a fact that cardio is demonized among bodybuilders.
Yeah,
it is. And it's like in subtle ways, but to the point where I thought, running of any kind was going to like severely limit my gains, or any kind of cardio. Like, oh, I'm a skinny guy, I can't do cardio. It's going to really fuck me up. And obviously there's truth to it in if you overdo it. But why do you think, what do you think is a healthy dose of cardio versus potential recovery issues and muscle loss?
Okay, so I divide cardio into categories. First, you have the cardio, which is going to be for weight loss and when you're just trying to lean out. And then the second one is going to be the cardio that's really beneficial for your heart. Now, believe it or not, those two things are not the same. While you can actually do the cardio, which is also going to be good for your heart and also going to help you lean out, it might not be the best solution for your recovery. To go over the simpler one first, the one that's going to benefit your heart the most is high intensity cardio, meaning something that gets your heart rate up significantly. I've been researching this on for some period of time, and basically I found out that low intensity cardio, although it's better than not doing anything, obviously, isn't as effective as high intensity cardio for basically keeping your heart healthy, because you want to get your heart rate up, like up. You have to train your heart, and then afterwards your heart rate is going to drop down, and that's ideal. That's why one of the most prescribed blood pressure medications is beta blockers, and what they basically do is they basically lower your heart rate, because the heart doesn't have to work very hard. You don't want to be resting and not doing anything special and you have a heart rate of 70. That's not good. I mean, a couple of times when I measured my blood pressure, because it isn't ideal and something that I'm gonna have to go over. But interestingly, because of my Muay Thai and high intensity cardio that I do twice a week, my heart rate is really good. I had a couple of times when I woke up and checked my heart rate, and was like in the high 40s, so like 49, 48. And that's like, and all some people are like worried about that, and they think, isn't that like too low? But generally no, that's almost like the perfect amount of heart rate, because it means that your heart isn't working excessively. Now that's the first cardio that's really beneficial for your heart, and that's high intensity. The second one is for stripping off fat. Now, I am of the belief that if you're going to strip fat, you want to do it in the easiest possible way, and that you can do it for the longest period of time, and that is low intensity cardio. So that's the cardio where you're going to be doing it on the treadmill, fast walking, 15, 20 minutes, and then increase it to how much you need in order to get your results. Now, if you're going to be doing 15 or 20 minutes of walking, let's just even say every day, for a lot of people, that's a lot of cardio. That probably won't have any impact on your recovery, on your muscle building, and on your performance. Nothing. It might even probably help with performance and recovery, because walking specifically has a really good effect on your body's digestion system. It has blood glucose regulation levels benefits. It has metabolic effects, meaning it increases your metabolism. So in a lot of sense, actually, low intensity cardio can be very beneficial. Also, one of the things that it does is, because it increases your metabolic rate, it gives you the ability to eat more. And something that we generally know if we're building muscle is that the body likes to be in that anabolic environment, meaning supplied with enough amino acids, supplied with enough glycogen, nutrients, so the body has the abundance of resources to build a muscle. Now, that's something that will be very beneficial for when you're doing low intensity cardio. Now, if you're doing low intensity cardio for a couple of hours a day, multiple times a week, that might be something that's going to influence your progress and recovery. And similarly, if we're going to talk about that high intensity cardio, the ones that's really good for the heart, if you're doing that one excessively, yeah, that one can also impact your recovery. So rule of thumb is, if you're going to do low, I recommend ideally 1 to 2 sessions max of high intensity cardio. That seems to be enough for a lot of health benefits. And maybe a couple of times a week low intensity cardio if you're trying to keep your body fat levels decent, or you just want to be active. So maybe I would do, let's say, 2 times a week, 15 or 20 minutes on the treadmill, like fast walking, and then I would do maybe once or twice a week like high intensity stuff, like Muay Thai drills, things of that nature, something that's really going to get your heart rate up, and then you're really covered in that regard. It's not going to affect your recovery, it's not going to affect your performance. You're going to keep your heart healthy, and you're going to keep your body fat levels low. So it's really a win-win scenario.
Yeah, that's interesting. You brought up the you got to do cardio that actually elevates your heart rate, but rather than that higher intensity stuff being more beneficial for heart health, because there's some people that well, I have a really active job, or I'm getting a lot of steps in a day, but that's not really working your heart in the same way.
You can even test it yourself. Like it's not difficult nowadays to get a smartwatch. Get a smartwatch, and while you're active, check your heart rate, and you'll see it. What doesn't really get how should I say, elevated all that much. And secondly, if you're a mailman and that's your job, that's basically your daily caloric expenditure. That's not something that, and especially if you're doing it all the time, your body's going to adapt to it, where it isn't that much of a stimulus anymore. And this is something that I also have to explain to a lot of clients, and that is, if you have an active job and you have to lose, let's say, 30 pounds, and we come to the point where we're cutting off calories, and no longer that is giving sufficient amount of results, we're going to have to introduce cardio. It's probably going to be low intensity. It's probably going to be very slow in the beginning, maybe 3 times a week for 15 minutes. And then people say, well, I'm doing already cardio on my work. Well, yeah, but as you can see, that cardio isn't sufficient. And second of all, we need something that we can actually track really efficiently. Like, can you track the cardio that you were doing at work? Well, no, not really, because you can have a lot of different variables. Maybe you're going to be walking less that day. Maybe you're going to be sitting more. Maybe you're this way. If we're going to do three days a week for 15 minutes on an incline, and we have a certain speed that we're looking at, you cannot take breaks. You cannot really do anything. There are no variables, so it's much easier. It's a much easier thing to gauge basically progress.
Awesome, man. Yeah, no, I totally agree with everything you're saying. And it's something that I've definitely added in recently, like consistently the last few months.
It's a really good thing.
And just like from an overall health perspective, it's like you don't want to be the guy who just neglects his heart, Not saying that resistance training doesn't. You still get cardiovascular benefits from resistance training, but it's not quite the same. It feels it feels so much different.
It's not, and I mean, if you are carrying excessive amounts of body fat, it doesn't matter how heavy you are training. You're probably getting up. You're probably giving your heart a little bit more pressure than what it has to be. Especially because if you're a bulk bra, if you're bulking a lot, you probably have a lot of glycogen buildup, and that it really isn't good for your heart as well, because it kind of compresses it. So you wanna try to balance things out. Obviously, you cannot do everything perfectly, but I mean, you can at least try to do things which are easy.
Mm-hmm. Cool, man. Well, the last thing I had on my list here was I wanted to revisit our conversation on bulking. You just brought up bulking, so that's good. Um, I wanted to like clarify what, because you kind of I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but what is your take on bulking? Because you made it seem like you're against the idea of bulking, but I think we got to define what bulking means. You know, the
Oh,
difference between intelligent bulking and dirty bulking. So I guess first off, what's your take on bulking?
well, as you mentioned, it's kind of makes sense to differentiate what is and what isn't bulking. For me, bulking is something that is the process at which you increase your caloric you increase your caloric intake by a bare minimum of 500 calories. That's usually not structured in any significant capacity, where you don't have an end goal, and where you don't really have an idea how it will progress, and you just kind of push the calories inevitably until you reach a point where you're kind of like, okay, time to stop. Now, yeah, as you mentioned, I'm not a fan of bulking. That's the first thing. Now, people tell me, well, does that mean that I have to be in a caloric deficit all the time? Like, no, obviously, no. You can be in a caloric maintenance and you can still build muscle. Now, if we kind of what the thing with it we discussed previously is kind of like the body likes being in that anabolic environment. It likes having a sufficient amount of nutrients, amino acids, carbs, glycogen, glucose, etc., etc. That's obviously true, but it doesn't take 500 calories to put your body in that environment. If you're feeding your body maintenance, you're giving it a little bit extra every day, that's going to be more than enough for your body to fuel your workouts and basically make you perform better. Because this is kind of something, again, that we touched on previously, and that is what is the main driving factor of muscle growth and strength: progressive overload. And how do we progressively overload? By training harder. And how do we train harder? Well, by eating the sufficient amount of calories and nutrients that we need. So you don't need to eat 1,000 calories to get those nutrients. Now, obviously, it will help if you put on a ton of weight. It will help, and you will get stronger. But then, are you getting stronger because you're building muscle, or you're getting stronger because you're getting fatter? Because both things can get you strong. It's like the old school strongmen say, mass moves mass.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to go in that route, I suppose that's fine. But I think for building muscle, I don't think it's needed. Personally, I very rarely have clients bulk. Recently, uh, I have a client which I've posted a couple of days ago, Parker, and he made significant progress. I think he put on like maybe like 70 pounds, and but we didn't bulk. I mean, I suppose some people would say that's bulking if you put anyone in any sort of caloric surplus, but I think at his peak he was in like 700 calorie surplus, and that was over time. That was over 8 or 9 months. So we started off at 300, then increased it by 300 when the progression stopped, and then we increased it by 300, and now he's not we're not increasing the calories anymore, because he reached a level where he has a significant amount of mass built up. And I think now if we started pushing it, now the amount of fat that he would accumulate would be significantly higher than the contracted tissue.
Mm.
So it has a beginning, it has an end, and it has a stop, and it's also planned out.
Yeah, so I think like you're not necessarily against intelligent bulking, because what you just described there is someone who kind of progressively overloaded his calories.
Yes, but again, not for everyone. I don't even believe that the intelligent bulking should be applied for a lot of people. I think intelligent bulking should be applied when you're severely underweight, or you're severe. By severely, I mean, I don't know what metric I could use, but I mean, generally speaking, if you're underweight, if you're skinny, if you're very weak and skinny, that's what I would start off the intelligent bulk approach. More than likely, I would just try to recomp. So I would try to fix up someone's macros and see how he progresses from there, and maybe just slightly
Mhm.
elevate the calories so his workouts aren't that are just slightly more enjoyable, and where he can push more weight. But I think, because here is the thing, inevitably, even smart bulking, quote unquote, is gonna put the person in question in a situation where he will always put on more fat than muscle, because muscle doesn't build that easily, and fat always accumulates much easier than muscle. And you have to realize what your ratio is. If you have really low amounts of body fat and really low amounts of muscle, even if your body fat climbed up to here, so too did your muscle mass. So even if you gain a little bit of fat, it isn't that big of a deal. But if your uh, body composition split is something like this, and your fat is here and your muscle is here, sure, by bulking you will increase your muscle mass to up to here, but your fat will also go up to here. So does it make any sense if you can really achieve that with just conventional training and eating in a caloric maintenance? That's up for interpretation. Personally, I don't put a lot of people on bulks again, unless in specific situations.
But what would you say to people that, so say someone, yeah, like you said, like if they're skinny, can you really like eat maintenance calories and gain, like get big? Like I think about these people like Alpha Destiny or Jeff Nippert who do like the bear mode thing.
Where isn't Alpha Destiny like shredded now?
He got shredded, yeah.
So he's not bear moding anymore.
I think he went back. I think he's going back
up.
Okay. I don't know. I don't follow him super closely, but yeah, like a lot of those natural guys do go through like a pretty significant bulk. So it's like, I don't know. I don't really think, like, how likely is it that someone is going to become obese to the point where like, you're not all of a sudden going to wake up obese bulking if you're eating good food, and if you're eating like 300 calories over maintenance, even 500 calories over maintenance.
Yeah, but you can, depending on how your metabolism is and what your metabolic rate is like, you can fairly easily put on like 15 or 20 pounds with 500 calories. Now, for some people, 20 pounds might not be a big problem, but for some people, they might, I don't know, it might take them 8 or 9 weeks to put 20 pounds, but it might take them 20 weeks to take care of that 20 pounds. So for some people, are you sure you want to go through that route? I know personally for me, I can really adjust my body weight however I like it. I can go up and down. Like, it isn't that much of an issue for me. I did it multiple times, but I don't want to go through another cut. So it's for me, like, I really don't. Like, there is a certain period now.
Cutting does suck. I'm cutting right now, and it does suck a little bit.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I don't want to be in a position where I need to cut. Like, currently, I'm kind of in a body weight where I really like. I mean, I'm satisfied with how I look, and if I want it to be a little bit more shredded, I'm gonna need like a couple of weeks, 3 or 4 weeks to look really, really shredded. And similarly, if I want to get a little bit bigger, again, it doesn't take a lot of effort. So I'm kind of in that sweet spot where our most famous, not a doctor, coach Greg Doucette would say, we're like in this maintenance period where it doesn't require a lot of effort. You're comfortable where you are. You aren't super shredded. You aren't super fat. You're just kind of in a comfortable place where you can maintain decent amounts of body fat. And you kind of mentioned something interesting, and that is that a lot of these like naturals go through cuts and bulks. Maybe it makes sense in the beginning. Simply for the reason that you have one less thing to worry about, and that is if you are nutrient sufficient. Because if you're bulking intelligently or unintelligently, you're going to have an abundance of calories which are going to enable you to train hard. For some people, that might be a viable option, but again, know the risks. If you are doing that, you're probably going to come to a point where you are going to be you're going to have to cut. And for some people, that might be easier, and some people might be harder.
Do you think, because I know, actually, I could probably get it up on my screen here real quick. Just one sec. Let's get this other window up. So I was just looking at, this one right here. You're talking about bulking. So like this right here versus this, you can see on. So I wouldn't necessarily say like, okay, so here you're kind of like skinnier fat in this one. And then here you get pretty bulked up. And this is where I would say like, this is bear mode. You even got the chest hair and everything. Yeah. But like, I wouldn't say this is bad though.
The photo on the right?
Yeah, like I wouldn't say that's bad. Like I would not look. I wouldn't
because
look.
That was taken after a workout with a better camera and slightly decent lighting. That's the best that I can look. That's basically how I would put it.
Yeah, like how you say bulking shouldn't look like this, but like is this necessarily bad to get up to this? Like obviously your body fat percentage is a little bit higher, obviously higher than it is here, where you're like pretty fucking shredded on the left, and then you get up and you're hardly like, you just look even more shredded here, if anything.
Well, that's the thing when you when you distribute your weight evenly and you don't rush it, it goes in the right places, so you actually even look bigger. The photo on the left that we're looking at now, so that's the first slide. That was the peak of my cut. So that was 75 kilos, maybe even slightly less, depleted, dry, as I could possibly get. 75 kilos. How much is that in pounds? So that's like 160 something, I think. 69. I don't know. So really, really, really depleted. The photo on the right is me currently. It's like it's 79 kilos. So which is like 174 or something like that. So that's a total of around 9 to 10 pounds of a difference between those two photos. But this is what 9 to 10 pounds of proper weight distribution looks like, because this is also glycogen. This is also fat actually going in the right places and kind of filling off that frame. Versus if we look at it from the second slide where I'm bulking, as I mentioned, this is the best that I can look in, like after a workout, with a pump, with a good camera. This is the best. Trust me when I say I didn't look that good in reality. Like it wasn't like I'm at a point where I can, if I see your belly protruding out off of a shirt, you pushed it too hard. I was big, don't get me wrong. I was like 200 something. I was like 90 something kilos in that image.
Did you?
Like
my only question / argument is: did you need to get to this point in order to get to this point?
That's a good question. I don't know.
That's the only thing. Like, I totally understand what you're saying, and I it's just like, do we need to go through as a natural guy? Like,
if you need to get really fat,
not fat, because this isn't fat. Like,
it is. As I was saying, it was. Trust me, that's just a good photo.
Okay, like you were a little bit chubby for sure, but I wouldn't say this is morbidly obese. But if you had to put on the chub in order to get to this, like, this is obviously after you went to that like extreme, and then you got shredded, and I can see like you shredded here, like you've got crazy triceps, biceps, shoulders, like you've built a ton of muscle. And like, were you building it during that? You were obviously building it while you were getting chubbier. And then it didn't seem like it was that hard. Oh, sorry. I don't know. I'm not going to say that, but obviously like getting shredded is hard. But
this one was hard. Yeah.
You didn't lose a bunch of muscle getting shredded.
I don't know. Looking at it now, I think I did.
You think you did?
Because I pushed it. Because at the very end of my cut, because you have to realize I went from 91 kilos, so that's like 205, to 74 kilos. That's like 160. So I lost like 40 pounds or 20 kilos. I would say this is the thing. I don't know if I lost weight because I have nothing to compare it at that weight again. So I don't know how I would have looked maybe if I didn't bulk and then I didn't cut at like 74 kilos. That's the issue. But looking at some of the photos, I looked severely depleted. I mean, if you look at my chest, you can see that there's practically no shape. Like, obviously the photo on the right, I have a pump and I'm hitting a pose, but I mean, you can see how everything just looks flat. And I have photos where I was a little bit from that period where I was a little bit fuller, but I still didn't look like I looked on the photo on the right. So I would say I potentially maybe even lost some muscle, but that was on my own accord, because the last couple of weeks of that cut were a little bit brutal. I was literally on a 6. I was doing carb cycling, but it wasn't really cycling all that much because I was like 4 or 5 days low carbs with 0 calories. Not 0 calories, but 0 carbs. And then my high carb day was like 70 grams of carbs. So I might have been pushing it a little bit too much. But to answer your question, do you need to get chubby to come to this point? I think not. But I think it's easier to get to that point if you get chubby. That's basically my reasoning.
Yeah, no, fair enough. It's interesting because it's kind of like the journey I'm on. Like, I'm trying to get lean. I'm trying to lean out right now and maintain all the muscle I've built. And then I'm curious to know, like, when if you do it slow,
you won't have a problem.
Like, even like cutting slow and bulking slow. That's yeah. What do you think about maintaining muscle when you're trying to cut down?
It can be done. It's obviously going to be difficult because inevitably your testosterone is going to dip. That's not really debatable. It will dip. You're going to be releasing more cortisol again, which is catabolic.
Yeah.
So it can happen, but I think you can prevent it if you do it really slow. If you're keeping your protein really really high, if you're not severely taking out your intake, I
Yeah.
think it can be done. And if you're training intelligent, like one of the big mistakes that I see people making is when they start a cut, like literally the first week, and they automatically start training lighter. Like literally, like for instance, they go from doing triples on the squat and fives on the bench, and now they completely transition to 12s, 15s, and 20s. Well, you
Yeah.
literally just lowered your volume and your intensity without any reasoning, and now the muscle literally has no need to stay there. It was there because it had a need to move the weight or to endure the stress that you were putting it under. So there is no need to do that. You basically just want to continue training like you did
Yeah.
previously, and then just try to sleep a lot, try to eat a ton of protein. That's where protein really comes in, because when you're bulking, calories are like being in a bulk is protein sparing. But whereas if you're cutting, you really need all the protein you have, just
Yeah.
basically to not, so the body doesn't have to strip all of that muscle. So I think it can be done, but I think also you have to be really careful and really slow when you do it, and ideally it shouldn't last for a very long time. I had clients who cut for, I don't know if, again, I suppose we can call it a cut because they were technically in a caloric deficit and they were losing body fat even though they didn't feel like it, but they were cutting for 12 or 14 weeks and they got stronger. Now, obviously, they were newer clients, so clients
Yeah.
who didn't have a lot of experience in the gym. So you can say, well, the stimulus of being new to the gym outweighed the stimulus of being in a caloric deficit, which might be true. But again, if the stimulus of being in a caloric deficit was so extreme, they wouldn't have been able to get stronger. So there's obviously a limit. I think I think when you exceed the 3 month mark, that's when you're running into,
Some problems.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't push it after that mark.
Yeah, and I like how you brought up the you shouldn't be switching up your training. The methods you're using to build the muscle should be the methods you use to keep the muscle.
Exactly,
You know.
exactly. The muscle is there as a response mechanism.
Hmm.
It doesn't know that you're benching on a Monday and squatting on a Wednesday. It just knows that on certain amounts, on certain periods, you're subjugating it to an extreme amount of tension and pressure, and it needs that muscle basically to endure that pressure. And as soon as that stimulus is taken away, the unit which basically counteracts the stimulus isn't needed anymore. So basically, why should you have all this muscle? And if you completely cut back on the training, so if you, as you mentioned, kind of what got you big and strong is the thing that's going to prevent you from losing that strength and muscle. So you don't no need to change that.
Boom. All right, man. Well, we're at the hour and a half mark, and we could probably keep going, but we should.
Shortest one we had so far.
Cool, man. No, that was really awesome. Just let people know where they can find you before we wrap up.
So obviously, you can find me on my new Instagram. So that is Uncle WBAOC.
For
Or
now.
just you can, or, or you can just obviously write Warboss AOC. I think that's also going to be efficient for you to find. You can find my, you can obviously find my brand. That's Legion Wear, or you can just search for. You can Google just Legion Wear Europe, or you can just write on Instagram Legion W Shop. You can find us there, and also you can obviously contact me on my email, anabolicoutlawcoaching.com. The same thing for my Telegram. So, but basically, if you find one of these, you're gonna find me on the others. So we pick whichever platform you want, and you're gonna find me on all the others.
Hell yeah, man. I really appreciate you coming on.
No problem.